Speaking against AI in education is Donald Kendal, director of the Glenn C. Haskins Emergin Issues Center at the Heartland Institute. His sharp insights on technology, policy, and the future have been featured in national media and best-selling books, including Writing with Glenn Beck. On the other side, speaking for AI in education is Edward Hudgins, PhD, founder of the Human Achievement Alliance and champion of unleashing young minds through individualized learning and exponential technologies. And of course, to moderate the debate is Jesse Manisto, former CIA analyst and Google Policy Fellow, but now Director of Debates at Braver Angels. She was always interested in communication, but truly found her calling after attending a debate with the Young Socialists and Charlie Kirk. Let the debate begin.
Good job.
Thank you so much, Missy, and good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here at the Moms for Liberty Summit. Let me tell you a little bit about why. Missy already said it. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but yeah, my first national debate, we do online debates where anyone can speak. This is our very special expert debate, but we do community debates as well. And when I was just a volunteer for Braver Angels, I participated in one on a subject perhaps of interest to this crowd, book banning. And I said, hey guys, this is about collection development, policies for our schools, and what we endorse to children. I was so scared to talk about this because I have a pretty progressive friend group, and cancel culture is real, my friends. So, you know what? They listened to me, and they said, I've never really thought about it that way before. I'm not sure how many minds I changed, but they didn't run me out of the room. And now I direct the program, and it is the honor of my life. But let me tell you, I want more Moms for Liberty voices in our debates. So we have a booth over there. Afterward, when you're wandering around, come talk to me. I can help you set this up. I can help you find progressives who actually want to hear what you have to say. But today, we have just a fascinating topic to talk about. AI is a great topic because the division isn't left and right. It runs through the left and through the right. And so, even though we have this conflict, each side is very clearly looking for the same thing, which is a healthy, constructive world for our children. A better society where we make the best of this technology that's here, but we figure out what the problems are together. So I'm delighted to be here to bring these two minds together to debate on this topic. So here's how our format is going to work. We will begin with 7-minute opening speeches, and then each of our speakers will be offered a 3-minute rebuttal. After that, we will take questions. Now, our questions have been pre-screened. I hope you came by our booth and had a chance to write one down. Speakers I know, or questioners I know you're over there. We look forward to hearing what you have to say for this conversation as well. And then our speakers will get closing statements. Now, before I call this debate to order, I do want to let you know that we always run a Braver Angels debate with a controversial statement, but it is never the House position of Braver Angels, nor is it the House position of Moms for Liberty. We have an affirmative speaker and we have a negative speaker, and we find the truth by debating it, okay? So, it is now my honor to call this debate to order. The resolution on the table is resolved, AI supports student educational development. We now turn to our affirmative speaker. Ed, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. To the question on the table, I say very much AI supports student development and should be in every classroom, and the sooner the later, or the sooner the better. Okay? Now, let me put this in a broader context. Right now, we're in an exponential technology revolution or era. Exponential technology in nanotech, biotech, infotech, robotics, and especially artificial intelligence is driving and is going to be transforming our economies, our social institutions, our public policies, and our culture in years to come. This technology in the hands of innovators, in the hands of entrepreneurs, could unleash a future of unimagined prosperity with long, healthy lives for all. Living to 100, 120, and still being healthy is no longer science fiction. That's the kind of revolution we're looking at. On the other hand, if it's controlled by government, or even worse, with dogmatic ideologues, wokes, then at the best it would be stillborn, and at worst it could be a dystopia, something like China's social credit system. Now, let me say a few words first about AI, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, more in the Q&A. When you think about AI, we have AI in every pretty much thing we have. In our phones, in our toasters, you name it, we have AI. But what we're talking about right now is the large language models that some of you are now familiar with, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Grok, and the like. And what they do is they go through massive amounts of data, and they're able to figure out what the language means, and therefore you can ask it questions, you can ask it to do things, and that sort of thing. And that's sort of what we're looking at. But what's interesting is we're now on the verge of AIs being able to upgrade themselves, to look at themselves and say, I could be more efficient if I do the following. That's the kind of thing that we're looking at in the future, and this is very important. AI is evolving right now. If we have this meeting in a few years, I'll probably be saying a lot of different things. So we're in a transition period where we don't know where AI is going. Now, I want to say a few things about the incredible potential of AI. For example, a few years ago, an AI reviewed 10,000 MRIs of healthy brains and 1,000 MRIs of brains that had either Alzheimer's, autism, or schizophrenia. The AI is able to look at the healthy brains and determine which ones are probably going to be afflicted by those ailments. Give you another example. There's a company called In Silico. And what it is doing is going through massive amounts of health data in order to look at the combinations of factors, including our genetic makeups, that cause us to be healthy or not healthy. So in the future, possibly they could come up with treatments for each and every individual, tailored to each of us, to each of our genomes. That's the sort of thing we're looking at. We're looking at AI transforming entire industries. The future is incredibly bright. I'm going to say there's 3 reasons why we need AI in the classroom. The first reason is that kids need to understand AI because it is the future. It's here right now. It's not just the future, it's the current. Many of us don't understand it fully. I don't understand it fully, frankly. And that's why our kids need to be trained in what it is, how it's developed, where it's going, those sort of things. And I want to say something very important. Because it's still evolving, we have to, in our classrooms, introduce the concept coming from Karl Popper and people like that about when you look at something, when you look at an opinion, when you look at a discovery, you try to see how would you work on the other side? How would you fail to falsify it? So if a chatbot tells you something and it seems weird, think about the other side. We have to train our kids to have that kind of skepticism in order to really get at the truth. The second reason to have AI in the classrooms is that kids need to understand it because they're going to be the ones that we want to use it in a free society, in a society of economic liberty. We want them to be the ones to cure diseases. We want to be them the ones to come up with new materials for industry and so forth. We want them to be the ones who figure out how to colonize and terraform Mars. I'm really big on that. Hope I'm around. Hope my kids, my 2 14-year-old daughters, can maybe do a visit there. We want our kids to be the ones who actually use this technology to do these incredible things. The third reason I'm for AI in the classrooms is AI is key to a very necessary revolution, education revolution, to individualize education. Now let me put that in a broader context. We have right now in this country a century-old model, an assembly line, one-size-fits-all model for education. It came up in the 1920s from a guy named Frederick Taylor who came up with concepts of mass production. And that's how we tend to do it. We come up with an average of this is what kids should be doing in the 9th grade. Here's where they should be. We give tests. That is the model. It was originally because we wanted to have citizens who could work on assembly lines. but that's not the case today. It's brain work that is going to be most valuable in the future. There's a reason why this approach doesn't work very well. It's because, as all of you as parents know, kids are individuals. They learn different ways. Some are visual, some are textual, some have different emotional ways of approaching issues, right? And so we need to have that kind of individualized education. Now, a century ago, the alternative, and we see this in many areas, was Maria Montessori, an Italian woman, I'm half Italian, by the way, who came up with the idea of individualized education. And there's a reason why the co-founders of Google, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, the founder of Wikipedia, and so many of these entrepreneurs went through the Montessori individualized training system. And there are other ways of doing this as well that's individualized. But here's the point, that to be able to individualize education, we're going to need AIs. I'm so optimistic about the spreading of parental choice, where parents can take their kids out of a bad school, put them into a better school. And what I'm saying, it's not a matter of just choice, it's what you choose. What I'm hoping is that alternative schools will look at ways to integrate the whole ecosystem of technology, but especially artificial intelligence, into their approaches. I'll conclude just very quickly by saying there are a lot of problems. There are deep fakes. There's a case where a chatbot had a child commit suicide. There are many challenges. How do we deal with them? Do we create another government agency to do it? The way the Department of Education has done things? No. We allow the market to do it. In other words, that is how you do it. Let the market do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our first speaker. And now, for our speaker in the negative. Donnie, you have 7 minutes.
Yeah, it was very, very well put, Ed. You could almost hear the AI speaking through his earpiece, telling him to say all of those things. But I just want to start off by thanking Moms for Liberty for platforming a conversation like this. The artificial intelligence is an issue that is absolutely emerging, and we have to be in front of it. That's the most important thing. So I just want to say thank you so much for having this very important discussion. Also, before I jump into my remarks, I want to encourage everybody that's interested in this topic at all, find me out in the hallway. I've been wandering around. I yearn to have conversations like this and to get your people's, just your average person's opinion on this issue, because I just find it so important. So I'm the director of Emergin Issues Center at the Heartland Institute. We try to find the issues that are kind of on the peripheries that aren't really getting the attention that they deserve, and then bring them into the forefront of the conversation. And AI is absolutely one of those issues. I absolutely agree with Ed. It's an incredibly important thing. The revolution that's going to be instigated by artificial intelligence becoming ubiquitous is probably understated. Anything that you've heard about the potential of AI is probably downplaying it. It's going to be massive. That's why it is so important that we have these conversations. And I also will say that I am not some anti-AI crusader. I did not found the John Connor Institute for Destroying Robots or anything like that. I am actually very hopeful, but I also think that it is very important to think about the worst case scenarios so that we could potentially mitigate some of the problems that might come along with this AI revolution. Because if we did that same thing back with the previous digital revolution, the social media revolution, maybe we wouldn't find ourselves in some of the mess that we currently are. So Facebook is only about 20 years old. Instagram is like 14. TikTok is barely 7 years old. But these things, these platforms absolutely changed the landscape when it came to media consumption, how people get their news, how people derive their entertainment, how they stay connected, and all of that. It's billions of users. When it comes to younger generations, it's basically 100% of younger generations use social media, at least to some extent. And the reason why these platforms exploded in popularity is because they're incredible. They're fantastic ways to stay connected. They bring a voice to the unheard. They shine a spotlight on stories that are being ignored, all of those things. But it's also became so ubiquitous because it's addictive. and it was built to be addictive. The entire marketplace of your attention is where these big tech companies thrive. They're trying to hold your attention as much as possible by showing you the things that you want to see, et cetera, et cetera. And that's come with a lot of side effects, whether it's skyrocketing rates of anxiety and depression, collapsing self-esteem, body issues, rising loneliness, self-isolation, as well as cyberbullying, harassment. All of these things came as side effects of this digital revolution, the social media revolution. And study after study is showing this, but I think like in our hearts, especially parents, kind of suspected this was the case before it was showed up in any studies several years after the fact. And it was basically like we unleashed, Silicon Valley unleashed this new drug on society without acknowledging or talking about any of the side effects. So now the AI revolution is here. Like Ed said, this revolution is going to be massive. It's absolutely going to reshape and transform everything, whether it's our entertainment system, our judicial system, our healthcare system, our information networks, and our education system, the way that we teach our children, right? How to view the world and each other and all of that. And in some cases, these things aren't just going to evolve, they're going to be absolutely unrecognizable compared to today's standards. So AI is being developed at breakneck speed, backed by hundreds of billions of dollars. Ed, maybe it's in the trillions of dollars at this point. And it's being built by some of the same Silicon Valley elites and global corporations that brought us the social media that have already rewired the human brain. That alone should cause us to pause, because this time it's our children's minds that are going to be reshaped by systems we don't understand, controlled by people we didn't elect, based on rules that nobody voted on. So we are conducting a massive social experiment, and it's one that we're putting America's children right in the center of the petri dish. So in this debate, my biggest argument is basically boils down to we're moving too fast with too little thought, and the stakes are far too high. So AI does have the potential to do amazing things, including stuff that relates to education. But it also has the power to cause a generation to outsource their critical thinking and degrade the mental muscles needed to reason, question, and wrestle with tough ideas. AI also has the power to amplify bias. These systems are built with the worldviews of their creators, whether it's Silicon Valley or Beijing. These worldviews are built into the foundations of these models. AI also has the power to persuade or indoctrinate. It is going to help shape the way children feel about their country, how they feel about their history, their religion, even how they feel about themselves. And it could do so in ways that are subtle and invisible and at scale. AI also has the power to centralize control, because we're not talking about thousands of competing AI companies. We're essentially talking about 4 massive ones, whether it's Meta, OpenAI, Google, and whatever Elon Musk calls his thing. So if you thought federal bureaucrats being involved in the curriculum is bad, just wait until unelected tech executives and global data engineers are in control of what the facts are. So my message tonight is not to say that AI has zero role in education. I'm here to say that we better know what that role is and what some of the side effects might be before we give them the keys to the classroom. Because if history is warning us, it's to
30
that
seconds.
if we embrace AI or new technology, we have to be aware of some of the side effects that are going to come along with it. And as parents, we can't afford to make this mistake again. In the last 20 years was about losing control of our attention spans. The next 20 years could be about losing control of our children's formation, and maybe even losing the foundations of human condition itself. Thank you.
And now, each speaker will get a 3-minute rebuttal before we move to questions. So back to you, Ed.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't disagree with Donnie about a number of the threats. I have 2 daughters. One of them likes the phone better. The other one likes the iPad better. She uses her iPad mainly for art, by the way, and the daughter uses it for games and music, by the way. But I'm very aware of these problems. And by the way, we're talking about a whole ecosystem. When we talk about AI, we're not just talking about the large language models. We're talking about this ecosystem that Donnie has brought up, which includes phones, It's going to include, by the way, biological monitors. I've got my Apple Watch here. I've got my Oura Ring monitoring my health in real time, by the way. Isn't that cool? And so we're talking about a whole ecosystem. The reason why we have to get this into classrooms and into education is exactly the reasons that Donnie brings up, is that there are challenges. How do we meet those challenges? Now, I can tell you one way that's not going to work, and that is to say, well, we're just going to try to push back with regulations because, you know, the Chinese are not doing that. The Chinese are moving full ahead. They're not going to say, well, you know, the Americans are getting a little bit timid. Maybe we have to hold back, okay? That's not what's going to happen. We need to be the leaders in this area, but we need to be the responsible leaders in this area. One way that we can be the responsible leaders is to air these issues and to let the market work. Again, I don't want a government agency doing it. Right now, there are about 1,000 state-level regulations before state houses and state senates. Unfortunately, most of them, or the biggest number of them, come from the states of California, Illinois, and New York. Now, what can you say about the governments of those states? Are they friendly to free markets? Well, no, not really. So those kind of regulations are dangerous. The Trump administration just came out with a very good, what I call light touch approach to AI, which is encouraging AI, but realizing that there are dangers and we need to look at them. But we need to take a proactionary principle approach, not a precautionary principle approach. And for example, as parents, and I'm a parent, Donnie's a parent, as parents, look at these potential dangers. What they're going to be able to do, and what we all should do, is educate ourselves, and then we go and say to ChatGPT and those folks, we're not going to use you because we see that there's too many problems our kids are having with this. And
30
so
seconds.
another one, Gemini will come up and basically say, hey, go to us because we don't have those problems. And then maybe Grok will come up and say, no, we can do it even better. It's competition. The reason why I'm holding something that 20 years ago didn't exist, this is a modern smartphone. And it came out almost 20 years ago, and now 90-some% of Americans have these things, you know, for better or for worse, I think, basically for better. But how did it get this way? It's because you had competition. You had a competition between Apple, Samsung, other companies.
Last thought?
And, yep, the last thought is that that's the way to do these things, through competition and through open discussion and educating ourselves on the dangers so that we can go forward with all the benefits of AI.
Thank you to Ed. And now, back to Donnie. You get 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
Great. So some of the things that Ed is saying, I think, are absolutely right. The idea that, you know, education could be tailored per student based on, you know, their specific needs or skill sets and all that sort of thing is absolutely the case. But it does so by collecting data on them. And it's data that's, okay, they're not responding to this prompt or this way of teaching, so let's approach it this way. It's a thing that, you know, our educators, you know, attempt to do, but, you know, at scale, when you have 30 kids in your classroom, it is difficult. That's why, like, tutoring or something is usually pretty advantageous. But if we have artificial intelligence that's able to do that, that's fantastic. But the thing is that it's not just the data on their learning styles or their habits that's going to be collected. It's all sorts of data that you know, from home life to their beliefs, even to their emotional health or anything like that. And it's all fed back into the models of the corporations that are using this so that they can use that data to fuel their artificial intelligence. Because data really is the resource of the future. You know, oil, that sort of stuff, gold, whatever. Data is the future. That's what drives the artificial intelligence. And basically what this idea is let's plug all of our children into it so that there is no privacy. All of their data, everything that they utter, whether it's in private or some, you know, feeling that they had or what is going to be collected, now harvested by these big Silicon Valley corporations that are going to be using it for profit. And so I outlined kind of all of my fears when it comes to artificial intelligence in my introduction. But truly my biggest fear, and this is like at a very personal level, I've had this thought before, but it really kind of coalesced when I was watching the four dads up here talk, where they were talking about, you know, what it's like to be a parent and the values that you're trying to instill in your children and all of that. And so my oldest is only 5 years old. So the biggest questions that he has for me is, what Pokemon is the strongest? It's nothing too serious, but I'm anticipating those big, hard-hitting questions, as he grows up. And I had this fear, thinking about artificial intelligence and the role that it's going to play in our society. I had this fear that I would walk downstairs one day and I would catch my son talking to ChatGPT, asking it the personal questions because he was too embarrassed to come to me. And if we're going to be supplanting those sorts of relationships with technology, that's really just a digital face on a giant corporation's body, is absolutely frightening to me. So those are the kind of the larger implications
30
that
seconds.
we do have to wrestle with when we decide that we're going to just go full steam into the AI revolution. I see the rest of my time.
All right. Now, I will get us started with a thought of my own to get the questions rolling. But, Missy, if you can find for us Rebecca Day and Bill Brewer, who will be up after I offer a question in the form of a story, which we'll roll in with the first question. So, I am a fan. I'm a power user of ChatGPT myself. I confess to that. It's kind of my buddy at this point, my co-intelligent creative partner, kind of like the Hobbes to my Calvin. I love arguing with it like that and fighting with it and just talking to it. It's not alive, but it's my stuffed tiger that I talk to as a grown-up. But that's the key, right? I am a grown-up. And I am also terrified of what we do with children as we adults figure this out. So I'm going to tell a little story that I think will be illuminative and relatable to all of you. So ChatGPT knows that I do not believe there is such a thing as a non-binary individual. It knows I've been canceled for saying this. It knows this is emotional for me. And it's been actually supportive. You can get it to do that. But that's in the usual context that I talked to it about debate planning, about psychology, about interests of mine. But one day I changed to a different context. I was talking to it about plotting and world building for a novel that I'm writing for kids. And I want it to role play a character in this world. And suddenly it gives me a full-on woke response with a they-them character. And it's like, you're going to love this. What? ChatGPT, I thought you knew me. I did not take kindly to it. I yelled at it. But after I expressed that shock, I did get curious, because I'm interested in this subject. So I said, you know I think that's harmful and false. So why did you give it to me? Here, in this context, where suddenly I am talking about children's fiction. And here's the core thing I want you to understand, which both of our speakers have alluded to, the architecture of a large language model, the technology that fuels these chatbots. Imagine it like a city of lights. It's all math running, but don't worry about the math. Just picture this city with traversed boulevards, the major roads that are lit up because of the connections between words. If you say the word creative kid, fantasy world, you want to know what word comes up close to that? Queer. Non-binary. It is a salience machine. It's not trying to tell you the truth. It's trying to tell you what it thinks is the most likely next word in the context you're using. And that is why suddenly, despite having my whole history there, knowing that this is a personally emotional topic to me that I do not like, they, them, change the context, and you're put on a different boulevard where different words are common, right? It says this is very well traveled. The model assumes you're talking about this, you probably want to go that way. So, with that, I would like to go to our first question. Do we have Rebecca? All right. A question perhaps about how to live in this world.
People are being encouraged to trust AI, but we know it makes mistakes. How do we educate children to understand that AI cannot be the arbiter of truth?
Let us go for 2-minute responses. First to our affirmative speaker, and then to our negative.
Okay. I actually alluded to that in my talk about how we should reform education by bringing AI into the classroom. And part of bringing AI into the classroom is to teach our kids exactly what you're talking about. And by the way, even before AI, anyone who took courses in logic or rhetoric, and I used to do these debates in high school, by the way, one of the things you learned when you were doing debates is you would trade, who does the affirmative and who does the negative, so that you would get both sides. And it doesn't necessarily mean you would agree with one side or change your mind, but that's how we learn to think. It's called critical thinking. And it applied before AIs, it applied before smartphones, and that should be integrated into how we teach about AI and all technologies in classrooms. So I would basically say that, and I would add that, that you're always monitoring AI, and you can see which AI actually seems to do the best, and especially when you have an AI that, for example, makes a scientific discovery, that's a pretty good indication that this one is good at least at X, Y, or Z. Curing diseases, for example.
Yeah, so I think Ed is largely right, but I think that a lot of this has to do with just like a public awareness thing, because if too many people are thinking of AI as just some objective thing like a calculator, you hit 2 + 2, you hit equals, and 4 is supposed to be generated, but it's actually a subjective thing, and you hit 2 + 2 and hit equals, and it says 5 because a whole bunch of woke reasoning. People have to be aware of that, so that they don't go into their accounting firm with this calculator that's busted and saying wrong things. So I think a lot of that has to do with just kind of public awareness, and again, having conversations like this brings attention to the fact that there is an inherent bias in all of these different systems. Some of it is just by accident, as you were explaining, that it's just the connections based on data scraped from the internet. But regardless of the reason for it, it is there. There was a Stanford University study that was done just last year that asked all the different leading AI models a series of political questions. And then it had people on the left and people on the right judge those answers and determine whether or not they thought it was a left answer or a right answer. Across the board, overwhelmingly, it was a left answer that was given. Now, again, some of this could just be the effect of, unintentional effect of just scraping data off the internet. But there are signs that these corporations are doing it intentionally. There was a goofy story from a couple of years ago about Google, where they had their image generator, where people would say founding father, show me a picture of a founding father, and it was George Washington, but he was black or something,
Yeah.
Or like a Nazi
30
soldier, but he was
seconds.
Asian. And Google had to come out and explain that they did this intentionally, that they had their weights for the product that was generated from a prompt intentionally encouraging diversity of outcome, right? Despite what the reality was, they were trying to force their kind of ideological agenda on the matter. Now, that's a goofy version, but thinking of it applied to other things, it kind of gets scary.
For our next question, we'll switch the order, so you'll get to go first, Donnie. I'm looking for Bill Brewer.
Right here.
Thank you, Jesse and Bravery Angels, for holding this, and thank you, speakers. I would like to ask each of our speakers to react to the following statement. We need a set of national standards limiting the scope of AI prompts to prevent emotional attachments with AI chatbots among K-12 users.
To you, Donnie.
So despite my concerns about artificial intelligence and the implications of it, I am still a libertarian conservative at heart that cringes at the idea of getting the government involved in some of these things. In the think tank world, I always say that there's kind of like two paths of kind of an approach when we're trying to get our message out there. There's the legislative-facing side, trying to get bills passed and regulations. And then there's the public-facing side that's just trying to get this information out there so that it's part of the public discourse. And I think that as of now, I'm more in that latter camp, where if parents were aware of all the mal effects that are associated with social media, maybe they would have taken the steps necessary more so to limit that sort of interaction with social media. And I think the same could be said about artificial intelligence. That it kind of starts in the regulation starts in the family.
Over to you, Ed.
I pretty much am agreeing with Donnie here. What I would say is this, again, as people who recognize the dangers of government, who take a look at what the Department of Education has done, that take a look at what the Food and Drug Administration has often done that actually makes us sick, and so forth, why would you trust politicians to come up with these guidances or these bans on these certain prompts, how would you define them? How would you have the regulators go in and determine, well, this one is a bad one, this one is an addictive one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Because I deal and have dealt with in decades with how regulations are put together. I see how at a granular level, they usually screw things up and make things even worse. I would rather, and by the way, again, I'm very aware of these. I have 2 children myself. If any of you are really interested in a book that goes into these kind of dangers, look at Jonathan Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation. I don't agree with everything in the book, but it's very revealing on how this works. Educate yourself about that, and then let us do it as a community, right? And try to deal with the issues that way, rather than giving it to politicians who almost certainly are going to screw it up.
All right, for our next question, do I have Beth? Beth Duran-Siang, am I saying your name correctly? There you are, yes.
Sorry, I ran away.
At what age should kids be exposed to AI in the schools or learn to use AI?
Let's go first to Ed.
Okay. Well, it depends, because when you talk about AI, I mean, we already use it in schools at certain levels. In elementary school, kids will often get some kind of a learning device where they go in and they maybe do some math. But one of the interesting things, and I've seen some of these, is it actually teaches them, if they give the wrong answer, it gives them some prompts about how to think about how to get the right answer. It might give them a template, for example. There's a business or a new, I forget whether it's a nonprofit or not, called Squirrel AI Enterprises. And sounds like a weird name, but what it is, it's founded by a guy named, or co-founded by a guy named John Couch. He was employee number 54 at Apple. He wrote an incredible book that everyone should read called Rewiring Education. And his idea is not that everybody should have an iPad. Everybody should have an iPad, but that's not the point. It's about how to integrate AI and the other associated technologies into education to help kids learn. And so again, it's where it's not just a matter of how do you introduce AI, it's what exactly kind of technology and intelligence you do at what particular age. And again, that's something we're going to learn experimentally. I have a table out there, Human Achievement Line table. I'll just mention, I have a piece that I wrote after I went to the parents' night at my kids' high school when they just went to ninth grade. It's called AI Eating Your Homework. So you can take a look at my piece where I actually discuss just your point about where you introduce AI.
So I think that when it comes to exposing, children to artificial intelligence, it almost kind of, that terminology seems a little like loaded, I guess, where it's like, when should you expose your children to like TV? It's like, well, they're watching Clifford right now, probably, but I don't give them the remote. So I think that there are certain like AI tools that are perfectly appropriate to young children. Ed talking about like the way of teaching basic math to little kids. I think is a perfectly appropriate way. In fact, me and my 5-year-old will use ChatGPT to conjure up stories based in the Star Wars universe because he's interested in that. And we do it together, it's collaborative, it's really fun. But to allow him to have like unlimited access to like a chatbot or something like that, never in a million years. Well, maybe not a million years, but not at the age of 5 for the very least. Because I do think that has a very corrosive effect when it comes to the idea of developing relationships. There's a very well-known concept called, oh God, I'm gonna mispronounce it because I'm on stage, but like AI sycophancy, where it's just like the AI is telling you, your ideas are wonderful and the best and all of that, because the AI relationship with you is completely one-sided. It doesn't have any needs. It doesn't have any emotional needs or anything like that. It's all completely one-sided. It's just trying to build you up. But in reality, interpersonal relationships is a give and take. So I would just sour at the idea of my son trying to figure out how to talk to somebody by interacting with AI. It would be absolutely terrible.
Are you telling me Hobbes doesn't love me?
It doesn't. That's a trick. It's a trick that it's trying to play on you.
For our final question, let's go to Representative Brandon Guffey, South Carolina House District 48.
Yes, thank you. AI personalization aims to give students content they want and what they need. However, it can create an intellectual echo chamber, preventing exposure to diverse and challenging viewpoints. How does relying on data-driven personalization undermine the fundamental educational goal of fostering critical thinking and exposing students to complex, conflicting information?
I'm first. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. It kind of ties into the idea of AI trying to tell you what you want to hear. You know, I came up with this idea for a new invention. Oh, it's the best ever. I haven't told you what it is yet, that sort of thing. But we do know, there has been studies, because this is such an emerging thing, the studies are essentially happening right now when it comes to like the persuasiveness, the ability for it to indoctrinate people to other ideas. That's where it gets really scary to me. There was a Stanford University study conducted just last year that was trying to figure out how persuasive AI can be to the average person. And I just want to read to you a little bit from the conclusion of this study. It says, our experiment showed that language models can generate text that is nearly as persuasive for US audiences as content we source from real-world foreign covert propaganda campaigns. Moreover, human-machine teaming strategies produced articles that were as or more persuasive than the original propaganda. So the thing is, if the AI is trained in a way or is programmed in a way that tried to get you to think in a certain way, it's better than Iran doing that, apparently. So that's something that we have to be very cautious about.
Yeah. Yeah, I basically agree with this, and I would say that there's a trap that if someone goes to a therapist, I've read about this, one of the dangers is that kids go to therapists and give the answer that the therapist wants, rather than, you know, well, I think the therapist wants me to say X, so I'm going to say X, which means that they never get real treatment. And since an AI can do the same thing, it's trying to appeal to you, and so it gives you what it thinks you want. And that's why I say that it's critical within in AI in education that you use the AIs and train the AIs to foster critical thinking. When I was in school, in high school, this was in the late 1960s, I had a leftist, what was then a liberal leftist professor. And he was really a great guy, and we always discussed stuff, and he knew I was a hardcore anti-communist. I still am, by the way. And so he said, look, Ed, you're going to get an A in the class. So why don't you do a report in favor of, pretend you're a Red Guard in China and justify the revolution going on in China. I did the report. I didn't become a Red Guard or wear a Mao t-shirt, but it made me think about where do these people come from? That's what critical thinking is. And one of the things I would say in the AIs, if I were running a school and having an AI tailor learning to this particular student, you know, you'd look at their emotional makeup, do they do better visually or textually or whatever, but you would also say, this student is a right-wing person. I'm going to throw in a little bit of left-wing stuff just to see what happens, and vice versa, because it's critical thinking that we use, that is the way that we learn about the world. Aristotle wrote, all men by nature desire to know. And part of knowing is not just feeding one thing or another, but it's critical thinking, meaning looking at all the evidence on all sides, keeping your minds open to where you might be wrong. Maybe you're right 75% of the time, but maybe this is a little more nuanced. AI can help do that more efficiently than maybe some of the mentors. And by the way, I think that AIs in school will have mentors, human mentors.
All right. Round of applause for our questioners, please. Thank you for dropping by the booth, for having something to say. We will now go to 4-minute closing statements from each of our speakers. So back to you, Ed. You have 4 minutes.
Okay. Well, I pretty much said what I want, but what I want to leave everybody with is a couple of things. Number one, artificial intelligence and the whole ecosystem of AI, you know, which means data processing, data collection, our phones, all of these kind of things, they are here and they are going to be moving at an exponential pace, and they are going to be transforming our world in the near term as well as the far term. We don't know where it is all going to go, okay? If I did, I would probably be rich and, sponsoring this conference myself or something, okay? We don't know. And so what I'm saying is the first thing is all of us have to recognize just how profound artificial intelligence, especially when artificial intelligence learns how to better itself and reprogram itself and all, that can be scary. But this is what's coming. So we have to educate ourselves on this. We have to utilize it because the possible benefits of artificial intelligence and the ecosystem in which we see artificial intelligence is truly profound. One of the things I work on most of late is artificial intelligence and technology in healthcare. We have a sick care system today. You get sick, you go to the doctors, maybe you get something that works, maybe not. Then you argue about how to pay the massive bill, and that's the system we have now. Right here in Orlando, Fountain Life has a system where they give you every test you can imagine, and they have an AI that actually can say, oh, it looks like you have pre-symptomatic X. Let's treat it before you get sick. This is a very expensive boutique healthcare system, but what we're going to see in the future with AI is this. Everyone has their genome sequenced, okay? I've had my genome sequenced. We collect all the information, epigenetic information on each of you as an individual, okay? We have wearables, your watch, your ring, implantables. You can be monitored by an AI in real time, and if it looks like in a few years you're going to have a heart problem, you're going to have a kidney problem, whatever, then the AI is going to say, here is what you do to make sure you don't get Alzheimer's, that you don't get these terrible diseases. That's what an AI can do. This is profound. What does it do to the labor system? What does it do to the Social Security system? What does it do to the Medicare system? How do you pay for this? Also, we're going to see AI moving very, very quickly to challenge certain jobs. We tend to think that there's certain jobs that are always going to be there, professional jobs, legal jobs, and so forth. AI is going to be moving those out very, very quickly. So we need to reform the education system, and that's why I say we should have AI in the education system, because if we don't, there are going to be people losing jobs because they're not trained and not retrained, and they don't know how to think in the future. The way I've put all this is to think of this as we want to futurize our children. Futurizing our children means that they get the best out of AI and all the associated technologies, the medical technologies and so forth, that they are part of this revolution that we needed in the education system to help them be the creators. But here's the other thing. It has to be done in a free society.
30
you
seconds.
do it in China. You see what's happening in China. They're actually falling behind in many ways. We have to use these technologies in a free society because liberty and freedom allows the entrepreneurs to work in their garages and coming up with weird things like phones and so forth. That's where so many of these businesses started in this country. That's the glory of this country, is we allow entrepreneurs to do these kinds of things.
Last
Freedom
thought.
is absolutely necessary for the technology of the future.
Thank you, Ed. And now, 4 minutes.
So the thing about Ed is he is a hopeless techno-optimist. And I love him for it, I absolutely do, but we really have to be vigilant. That's the most important thing. That's the message that I want to leave off today. When Ed talks about the ways that AI can transform the education system and tailor its learning to all of these, he's right when it comes to the theoretical, right? But we have seen with social media and these big tech companies the way that people are treated as a commodity, right? So I don't think this was a study. I think this was something that was actually revealed that Facebook amplified or boosted comments on posts that were antagonistic. Because it knew that that would drive engagement, that somebody would see something like, oh, no, you're wrong, or something like that, because their goal is to keep you engaged on the platform, to keep your attention. So that's the reality that we're going to see with artificial intelligence, that these big corporations are going to use it to manipulate, they're going to use it to profit off of you, and it's going to come along with side effects that are going to be seen at an individual and a societal level. That's the thing that we have to be completely vigilant about and not ignore based on the idea of what could theoretically happen in the positive column of the ledger. So I do believe that the AI revolution is coming. It's here. It's going to be massive. Like I said, if you heard whatever you've heard about the AI revolution, multiply it by 5 because it's going to be massive, especially going into the future. And the impact of it is going to dwarf that of the social media stuff that I keep harping on. But that's exactly why we have to take this serious and have to be vigilant and thoughtful about it right now. So again, I'm so thankful that Moms for Liberty is hosting this debate because it is so important that we're talking about this now and not 5 years later after all of the mal effects have manifested already. So if we get this wrong, we're risking a generation that's informed but not wise, that's connected but not free, that's intelligent maybe, but not independent. But if we get it right and we insist that human values guide technology, not the other way around, then maybe this revolution won't just make us smarter, it could make us wiser. And that's my hope. I'll end off with a hopeful note as well, because that's why I'm sounding the alarm. It's not because I fear the future, it's because I still think that we have an opportunity to shape it. So I want to thank you all. I think this has been wonderful. Thank you, Ed, and thanks, Moms for Liberty, for hosting this.
Thank you, Donnie. Thank you again, Ed. And I just want to say, this debate is hereby adjourned. Thank you, all of you.